I inherited $3 billion from an uncle I'd only met twice in my life. Everyone thought I was the luckiest person alive. They had no idea what came with that money, or what I found hidden in his mansion that made me wish I'd never opened that door. My name is Chidi, and I grew up in a cramped 3-room apartment in Lagos with my mother, Amora, and younger sister, Zainab. We weren't starving, but we knew what it meant to stretch every naira until it screamed. My mother sold fabrics at Baligan Market, waking up at 4 in the morning, coming home after dark, her hands stained with dye and her feet swollen from standing all day. I learned early that money was something you fought for, not something that fell from the sky. My uncle, my father's brother, was a shadow in our family history. A name whispered with equal parts awe and bitterness. A man who chose dollars over family, or so I was always told. I remember the day the lawyers called. I was 28, working as a graphics designer in a cramped office in Yoba, sharing a desk with 2 other people, wondering if I'd ever save enough to rent my own studio apartment. The voice on the phone had an American accent, crisp and businesslike. Mr. Okofor, we're calling from Whitman and Associates regarding the estate of Chief Obiora Okofor. You've been named as the sole beneficiary of his estate. I thought it was one of those scam calls. Yahoo boys getting more creative. I almost laughed and hung up. My uncle Obiora. The man who left Nigeria when I was 5, who sent a birthday card once with $1 bills that my mother burned in our backyard, her face twisted with an anger I was too young to understand. The man who built a technology and real estate empire in America while we counted coins to pay for my school fees. The man whose name made my mother's entire body go rigid. And now, apparently, he'd left me everything. The lawyers flew me to New York first class. First class. I'd never even been on a plane before. The flight attendant offered me champagne, and I took it because I didn't know what else to do. Around me, people tapped on laptops like flying was nothing, like crossing an ocean was as casual as crossing the street. The law office was in Manhattan, all glass and steel and views that made Lagos look small in my memory. They slid papers across a table that probably cost more than my mother's entire market store. With each signature, my hands shaking, my life transformed. $3 billion. A mansion in Connecticut. Properties in London, Dubai, and Johannesburg. Investment portfolios that read like a foreign language. I called my mother from the hotel room they'd booked for me, a suite bigger than our entire apartment back home. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry because international calls meant emergencies. Mama, Uncle Obiora died. He left me everything. The silence stretched so long I checked if the call had dropped. Then, in Igbo, quiet and fierce, Chidi, that money is cursed. Do not touch it. Come home. But how could I come home? Zainab was in her 2nd year at the University of Lagos, struggling, taking on 2 train jobs to help with fees. My mother's knees were giving out from decades of standing on concrete. Our apartment ceiling leaked every rainy season, and we just put buckets down and pretended it was normal. This money could change everything. I didn't listen to my mother. I told myself she was just being traditional, superstitious, unable to accept good fortune because we'd known so little of it. The mansion was in a place called Greenwich, Connecticut. The taxi from the airport cost more than I used to make in a week. When we pulled up to the gates, actual gates with a guardhouse, I thought there had been a mistake. This wasn't a house. It was a compound. The kind of place I'd only seen in American movies. 23 rooms. An indoor pool that looked like something from a resort. A wine cellar. A home theater. A garage with 3 cars, each worth more than most houses in Lagos. I walked through it in a daze, my cheap sneakers squeaking on marble floors, touching furniture that felt too expensive to sit on. The estate manager was a black American woman named Patricia who'd worked for my uncle for 15 years. She showed me around with professional courtesy, but I saw something in her eyes when she looked at me. Pity, maybe. Or warning. Your uncle was a very private man, she said as we stood in the master bedroom with its view of manicured gardens. Very particular about his space. About his secrets. I posted photos on Instagram that first week. The pool. The view from my bedroom window. The ridiculous walk-in closet that was bigger than the room I shared with Zainab our entire childhood. The comments poured in from friends back home. Guy, you don't hammer. Chidi the billionaire. Don't forget us all. But at night, alone in that massive house, I felt something wrong. The silence was too heavy. The shadows too deep. I'd grown up with noise, traffic, neighbors arguing through thin walls, street vendors calling out their wares at dawn. This silence felt like it was hiding something. I started exploring every corner of the mansion, opening every door, mapping out my new kingdom. I found rooms I couldn't imagine using. A library with books in languages I didn't speak. An office with a desk the size of a bed. A gym with equipment still wrapped in plastic. But there was one door on the 3rd floor, at the end of a hallway lined with portraits of people I didn't recognize, that wouldn't open. The door was solid mahogany, dark and imposing, with an electronic keypad that blinked red whenever I approached. No handle, just that keypad and a sense that whatever was behind it wasn't meant to be found. I asked Patricia about it during our weekly check-in. She was going over the accounts, the properties, the investments, numbers so large they stopped meaning anything to me. Patricia, what's behind the locked door on the 3rd floor? Her pen stopped moving. She looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. Mr. Okofor, Chief Obiora, he specifically requested that room remain sealed. It's in his instructions. No one is to enter it. Ever. But I own this house now. Everything in it. She closed her folder slowly. Some things aren't about ownership, Chidi. That room, your uncle visited it every night before he died. Every single night. He'd go in there for hours, and when he came out, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. I begged him to let me call someone, a therapist, a priest, anyone. He said the room was his penance. Penance for what? Patricia stood up, gathering her things. I've worked for wealthy people my whole career. I've seen a lot. But that room. Whatever's in there broke your uncle. It's why he died alone in this big house with no friends, no family, no peace. She paused at the door. Leave it locked, Chidi. Please. But she knew I wouldn't. I saw it in her eyes as she left. The next morning, I found her resignation letter on the kitchen counter, along with a handwritten note, "Your uncle knew some doors should stay closed. He opened them anyway. Look where it got him. I'm praying for you." I hired a locksmith from the city. A Russian man named Dmitry who advertised the discretion guaranteed on his website. He arrived with a bag of tools and asked no questions, which I appreciated. It took him an hour to bypass the electronic system, drilling carefully, rewiring something I didn't understand. When the light finally blinked green and the door clicked open, Dmitry packed his tools quickly. "I was never here," he said, refusing to make eye contact. "And if someone asks, tell them you did this yourself." He was gone before I could ask what he meant. I stood in the hallway for a long time after he left, staring at that open door. The room beyond was dark, but I could smell old paper, stale air, and something else. Something that made my skin prickle. I turned on the light and stepped inside. The room was large, maybe 20 feet by 30, with no windows. The walls were completely covered, every inch, with photographs, newspaper clippings, handwritten notes in English and Igbo, strings of red thread connecting different pieces like some kind of detective's nightmare. But it wasn't a detective investigating a crime. This was a criminal documenting his own sins. At the center of the far wall was a large photograph of my father, Ikena Okafor. Young, maybe 30, smiling in a way I'd never seen in the few photos we had of him at home. He was standing in front of a building with a sign, Okafor Tech Solutions. My father died when I was 4. A car accident in Abuja, my mother always said. He'd been driving back from a business meeting, fell asleep at the wheel, that was it. We didn't talk about him much. It hurt Mama too much, and I learned early that some questions made her cry in a way that felt wrong to cause. But here he was, larger than life, surrounded by documents I didn't understand. I moved closer, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The photographs told a story. My father and uncle as young men, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling. My father in a suit, signing papers, shaking hands with white men in what looked like an American office. More photos of the two brothers, the smiles getting tighter, the body language changing. Then photos of just my uncle, and my father absent. I started pulling down folders from the shelves that lined the other walls. They were meticulously organized, labeled with dates and names. I found one marked, Ikena Okafor, brother, 1995 to 1997. Inside were letters. Dozens of letters my uncle had written but never sent. My hands shook as I began to read. "Dear Ikena, I know you'll never forgive me for what I did. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to understand, it was never personal. It was just business. You were too soft, too trusting. You wanted to build something to help people. I wanted to build an empire. Those two things can't coexist in this world." Another letter, dated 6 months later, they told me today. "You're dead. You drove into oncoming traffic outside Abuja. The police are calling it an accident, but I know better. I know what I did to you. I know I took everything, the company, the patents, the future you promised Amora and the children. I know you couldn't live with the failure, with the shame, with what your brother did to you." My vision blurred. I sat down hard on the floor, the folder spilling papers around me. My father hadn't died in an accident. He'd killed himself. And my uncle had driven him to it. I kept reading, unable to stop even though each word felt like a knife. The story emerged piece by piece, a nightmare told in neat handwriting on expensive paper. My father and uncle had started a tech company together in Nigeria in the early 90s. They'd both contributed ideas, both worked 18-hour days, both dreamed of building something that would put Nigerian innovation on the global map. But when American investors showed interest, when the money started flowing, my uncle had pushed my father out. He'd used legal tricks, exploited clauses in contracts my father hadn't fully understood, turned the other board members against him. Within a year, my father had gone from co-founder to a footnote, his name removed from the company history, his equity dissolved into nothing. My father had trusted his blood. And his blood had betrayed him for profit. There was a copy of a suicide note, and seeing my father's handwriting made something break inside me. "Amora, my beautiful wife, I have failed you. I have failed our children. I trusted Obiora because he was my brother, and he destroyed me because I was convenient to destroy. I cannot face you knowing what I've become, a fool who lost everything because he believed family meant something. Tell Chidi and Zainab that their father loved them but was too weak to survive in a world where brothers betray brothers. I am sorry. I am so sorry." I wept then, sitting on the floor of that horrible room, crying for a father I barely remembered and for a mother who'd carried this secret for 24 years to protect me and Zainab from the truth. But the room held more than just my family's tragedy. As I explored further, I found file after file documenting other people my uncle had destroyed. There was Emmanuel Adebayo, who'd owned a promising logistics company that competed with one of my uncle's ventures. My uncle had systematically stolen his clients, undercut his prices to unsustainable levels, then bought a bankrupt company for pennies and shut it down. There were photos of Emmanuel and his family, with handwritten notes, 3 children. Lost their house. Wife left him. Heard he drives Okada now in Lagos. There was Grace Nosu, a brilliant software engineer who developed an algorithm my uncle had patented under his own name after firing her and burying her in non-disclosure agreements. Her folder contained a newspaper clipping about her death from cancer at 43, unable to afford treatment. My uncle had written in the margin, she could have been great. I made sure she wasn't. There was Adewale Bekir, who'd been my uncle's first major investor back in Nigeria. My uncle had squeezed him out once the company went international, using technical loopholes to void his equity. Adewale's folder contained photos of him getting older, his business ventures failing one after another, and a final note, died in 2015. Heart attack. His children blame me. They're right too. Page after page, folder after folder, a catalogue of destruction. Real people with families, with dreams, with lives my uncle had deliberately ruined in his climb to the top. And he documented it all, photographed them, tracked their declining fortunes, watched from a distance as they suffered from what he'd done. This wasn't just guilt. This was something darker. A man who couldn't stop destroying people but also couldn't stop watching what his destruction had done. A man obsessed with his own sins, creating a shrine to them, visiting them every night like some twisted form of prayer. I found letters my uncle had started writing to me over the years, dozens of them, none ever sent. One from my 10th birthday, "Dear Chidi, today you turn 10, and I wonder what Ikena would think seeing you grow up without a father. I sent money to Amara, but she sent it back unopened, as she always does. I tried to help, but how do you help the family of the man you killed? Because I did kill him, even if my hands never touched him. I killed him with greed and ambition and the belief that business justifies any betrayal. Another from my 18th birthday. Chidi, you're a man now. I've watched you from afar, photos I've paid people to send me, reports on how you're doing in school, what kind of person you're becoming. You're good, like your father was. That goodness will make life harder for you, just like it did for him. I'm leaving you everything when I die, not because you deserve to inherit my sins, but because someone needs to know. Someone needs to decide what to do with an empire built on broken people. The most recent letter was dated just weeks before his death. Chidi, if you're reading this, you found the room. I couldn't destroy it myself, too proud, too much of a coward. I visit this room every night and face what I am. It hasn't made me better. It's only made me tired. I'm leaving you $3 billion and a choice. You can keep it, enjoy it, tell yourself that what I did was just business and what happens in business stays in business. Or you can do what I couldn't, make it right. Fix what I broke. Be the man your father was before I destroyed him. I don't know which choice is braver. I only know I wasn't brave enough to make either one. I don't know how long I sat in that room. Hours, maybe. Long enough that the sun set and the only light came from the single bulb overhead, casting harsh shadows on all those faces, all those rain lives. My phone buzzed. A text from Zainab. Chidi, when are you sending money for next semester? Also, Mama's knee is getting worse. Can you pay for the doctor? Simple request. Reasonable request. Request I could now fulfill without thinking twice. My sister's education. My mother's health. Our family's security. All of it finally within reach. But every naira, every dollar, every cent was stained with blood. My father's blood. Emmanuel's ruined life. Grace's lonely death. Aduwale's broken heart. I called my mother. It was late in Lagos, but she answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting by the phone. Mama, I know everything now. I found the room. Her breath hitched. Oh, Chidi. I told you. I told you to leave that money alone. Why didn't you tell me the truth about Papa? She was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. When she spoke, her voice was thick with tears. Because you were 4 years old, and how do you tell a child that his father died from a broken heart? How do you tell a child that family betrayed family, that his own uncle, valued money more than his brother's life? I wanted you to grow up believing in something good, believing that family meant something. Even if it was a lie. He left me everything, Mama. All of it. The money, the guilt, the choice of what to do with it. Then give it away, my son. All of it. That money killed your father. Don't let it kill you too. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say it wasn't that simple, that we needed this money, that we'd suffered long enough. But sitting in that room, surrounded by the evidence of what that money cost, I couldn't find the words. There are people, Mama. People Uncle Obiora destroyed. People whose lives he ruined. Should they continue to suffer just because he was evil? Or should I try to make it right? My mother's voice softened. Your father would say make it right. He always wanted to help people. That's why his brother found him so easy to betray. He trusted too much, cared too much. But Chidi, listen to me. You cannot save everyone. You cannot fix everything your uncle broke. Some things stay broken. But I have to try, Mama. If I just keep this money and pretend I don't know where it came from, then I'm no different from him. She sighed, a sound full of worry and love. Then try, my son. But don't lose yourself in his sins. Don't let his guilt become yours. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness of that room and made a decision. I couldn't unbreak what my uncle had broken. I couldn't bring back my father or the years my mother spent struggling alone. But I could try to balance the scales, even if they'd never be truly balanced. I started making a list of every person mentioned in those files. Every company destroyed. Every family bankrupted. Every life derailed by my uncle's ambition. It was a long list. The next morning, I hired a team of investigators. Not the corporate type my uncle had used to destroy his competitors, but the kind who specialized in finding people who'd fallen through the cracks. I gave them names, dates, whatever information I could pull from those files. It took 3 months to locate everyone who was still alive. Some had rebuilt their lives and wanted nothing to do with my uncle's legacy or his guilty nephew. Others had disappeared into poverty, into addiction, into the kind of invisible suffering that happens when someone steals your future. Emmanuel Adebayo was the first person I visited. I flew back to Lagos and found him in Suralia, living in a single room with his current wife, his third marriage, I'd learned. He was 58 but looked 70, his body bent from years of riding motorcycle taxis through Lagos traffic. We met at a booker near his house. He ordered omla and yudu with shaking hands, and I realized he probably couldn't afford to eat like this regularly. Your uncle destroyed my life, he said after I explained who I was. I had a company, employees, drivers, warehouses. I was going to expand to Accra, to Johannesburg. I had plans. I had a future. He started his soup without eating. Now I drive Okada. My children grew up poor because of him. My first wife left me, said I was weak, said a real man would have fought back. How do you fight a billionaire when you can't even afford a lawyer? I want to give you money, I said. Enough to retire. Enough to start another business if you want. Enough to know you'll be okay. Emmanuel laughed, bitter and broken. You think money fixes this? You think Naira can give me back 30 years? Can give me back my reputation? My first marriage? The respect of my children who grew up thinking their father was a failure? No, I said quietly. I know it can't. But it can give you dignity for whatever years you have left. It can let you stop driving through Lagos traffic in the rain. It can let you breathe. He looked at me for a long time, searching for the trick, the angle, the betrayal that surely must be coming. Why are you doing this? Because my uncle destroyed my father too. And my mother. And me, in ways I'm still discovering. I can't fix what he broke, but I can try to clean up some of the mess. Emmanuel accepted the money eventually. $2 million in a trust that would pay him monthly for the rest of his life. He cried when I showed him the papers, and I cried with him, 2 men weeping for time neither of us could get back. I did the same with others. Grace Nosu's children received enough to secure their futures, along with a formal apology and acknowledgement of their mother's work, her name finally attached to the algorithm she'd created. Aduwale Bekere's widow got the equity her husband should have had, decades too late but at least acknowledged. Person after person, family after family, I tried to return what my uncle had stolen. Some people refused. Too proud. Too hurt. Too convinced that no Okafor could be trusted. I understood. I left my contact information and moved on. But there was one more person I needed to see. One more file in that room that I couldn't ignore. Kemi Olabode. Her folder was thick, filled with photographs spanning years. She'd been my uncle's girlfriend in Nigeria before he left for America. Young, beautiful, smart, a law student at the University of Lagos with a future that seemed bright. My uncle had made her promises. Marriage. Partnership. A life together building his empire. Then he'd left for America and never came back. The folder contained letters she'd written him, letters he'd kept but never answered. Photos of her waiting at the airport. Eventually, photos he'd hired someone to take of her years later. Married to someone else, living in a modest house in Ikeja, working as a secretary because she dropped out of law school when he left and never went back. There was a final note in my uncle's handwriting. I loved her. That's the terrible thing. I actually loved her, and I left her anyway because America meant more to me than any person ever could. I never apologized. I never explained. I just left. I found her through the investigators. She was 61 now, widowed, living with her daughter in the same house in Ikeja. I called her, and when I said who I was, Obiora's nephew, she went completely silent. Please don't hang up, I said. I found something that belongs to you. Letters. Photographs. An apology my uncle never had the courage to give you. We met at her house on a Saturday afternoon. She served me zobo and chin-chin, her hands steady, her face unreadable. I gave her the folder. She opened it slowly, and I watched her travel back in time through those photographs. The girl she'd been. The hope in her eyes. The way that hope had died. I waited for him, she said finally. For 3 years. Everyone told me to move on, but I waited because he promised. Because I loved him. Because I believed family loyalty meant something to him. She closed the folder. Then I heard he got married in America to some Oyinbo woman. Didn't even have the decency to tell me himself. I found out from a mutual friend who saw photos. He never married, I said quietly. He lived alone. Died alone. That engagement was a lie to make investors think he was stable. He was never with anyone after you. She looked at me sharply. You think that makes it better? That he didn't replace me but just discarded me. Like I was nothing. No. I think it makes it worse. I think he loved you and left you anyway because he loved ambition more. I think he spent the rest of his life regretting it but was too proud to admit it. Kemi was quiet for a long time. Then, why are you here, Chidi? What do you want from me? I want to give you what he should have given you. Not love, that's gone. Not the future you should have had, that's gone too. But security. Comfort. Recognition that he wronged you and that you deserved better. I offered her $5 million. She refused at first, said she didn't want his blood money. But her daughter, a single mother struggling to raise 2 children, convinced her to accept it for the grandchildren's sake. As I left, Kemi said something that stayed with me. Your uncle wasn't evil, Chidi. That's what made it worse. Evil people you can understand. But Obiora was just empty. He chose money over people because he had nothing inside him worth more than money. Don't be like him. Don't be empty. Over the next year, I dismantled my uncle's empire piece by piece. I sold the mansion. I couldn't live in that house of ghosts. I sold the properties in London and Dubai. I liquidated investments, shut down businesses that served no purpose but profit, donated to organizations that helped people rebuild after corporate predation. The foundation I created, the Akena Okafor Foundation, named after my father, focused on supporting small businesses that had been crushed by larger competitors, on helping families recover from corporate malfeasance, on providing mental health services for people dealing with financial trauma. My mother flew to America for the foundation's launch. Standing next to her as we cut the ribbon, I saw something in her face I'd never seen before. Pride, yes. But also relief. Like she'd been holding her breath for 24 years and could finally exhale. Your father would be so proud, she whispered. You took Obiora's weapon and turned it into medicine. Zainab, now finishing her degree in medicine, asked me the question everyone was thinking, do you regret it? Giving away billions. You could have kept enough to live like a king for the rest of your life. We were walking through Central Park, something I'd started doing to clear my head after long days at the foundation offices. The trees were just beginning to turn, autumn painting everything gold. Every night, I used to wake up in that mansion in a cold sweat, I told her. Dreaming about Papa. Dreaming about all those people in the files. Feeling like the money was suffocating me. Now I sleep fine. I'm not rich, but I'm not haunted either. But you kept some, she pointed out. You didn't give everything away. I kept enough to run the foundation. To take care of you and Mama. To live comfortably but not excessively. Uncle Obiora's mistake wasn't having money, it was letting money become his god. I'm trying not to worship the same idol. The foundation grew. We helped hundreds of people in the first year. I hired people who'd been where our beneficiaries were, people who understood what it meant to lose everything to someone more powerful. We didn't just give money. We gave support, therapy, legal help, business advice. One day, about 18 months after I'd opened that locked room, I got a call from Emmanuel Adebayo. He'd used his trust fund to start a small logistics company again, nothing like what he'd had before, but enough. He was hiring young people from his neighborhood, giving them opportunities, building something modest but meaningful. I thought I'd never work again except as a driver, he said. Your uncle took my future. You gave me a different one. It's not the same, but it's mine. I visited the house in Connecticut one last time before the new owners took possession. I stood in that third floor room, now empty, the walls bare, all those files and photographs donated to a research center that studied corporate ethics and predatory business practices. The room was just a room now. No ghost. No guilt. Just empty space waiting to be filled with something better. I thought about my uncle, visiting this room every night, marinating in his sins but never doing anything about them. He'd had all that money, all that power, and he'd used it to document his cruelty instead of fixing it. He'd been imprisoned by his own wealth, locked in a cage of guilt he'd built dollar by dollar. I wasn't going to be him. I'd opened the cage and walked out. I still have some of my uncle's money. The foundation is sustainable, and I live comfortably in a modest apartment in Brooklyn, full circle from where I started. Zainab is going to be a doctor. My mother retired and spends her days with her grandchildren, Zainab's twins, telling them stories about their grandfather that are finally true. Sometimes I wonder what my uncle would think if he could see what I did with his empire. Would he be angry that I dismantled what he built? Would he be relieved that someone finally did what he couldn't? Would he understand that his greatest gift to me wasn't the money but the warning, a living example of what happens when you choose profit over people until there's no person left inside you? I'll never know. And maybe that's okay. What I do know is this: you can inherit money, property, even guilt. But you don't have to inherit the sins. You don't have to repeat the patterns. You don't have to become what you're handed. My uncle gave me $3 billion and a room full of ghosts. I gave away the money and freed the ghost. And in doing so, I freed myself. That's the real inheritance. Not the money, but the choice. If you're listening to this tonight, maybe you're facing your own inheritance. Not money, but patterns that don't serve you. Trauma passed down through generations. Expectations that crush instead of lift. Sins committed by your parents that you're somehow supposed to carry. You get to decide what you keep and what you let go. You get to decide if you repeat the cycle or break it. People might not understand. You might lose things you thought defined you. You might look foolish to people who worship money or power or legacy. But you gain something invaluable, the freedom to look in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. I chose my father's path over my uncle's. Trust over betrayal. People over profit. It cost me billions, and I've never felt richer. If my story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone standing at their own locked door, deciding whether to open it. Someone choosing between comfort and conscience. Someone wondering if one person can make a difference in a world that seems designed to reward the ruthless. You can. We can. One choice at a time. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is walk away from everything you thought you wanted and walk toward the person you know you need to be. That door on the 3rd floor. I finally closed it. Not by locking it again, but by making sure there was nothing behind it worth hiding anymore.